Members strong, and they're basically running the place. Everybody else in the country are more or less subjects. Yes, Xi Jinping, while we could argue is one of the most dynamic, one of the more high-profile and proactive leaders that we've seen in China for 20 or 30 years, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have problems. He does have to be cognizant of that base, which is the party primarily.
The other aspect of China we don't discuss a lot is the preponderance of Han Chinese as the party's core base. I mean, it's not apartheid, but it must carry with it some of the internal dissent risks of apartheid. And in China, you would think, despite the surveillance tech, must also be getting harder and harder to control, or is that not right?
China is about 94% ethnically Han Chinese, so it's overwhelmingly dominated by that particular ethnic group. But interestingly, you take a look at a map of China, and almost 50% of China's territory is made up of 4 mostly Western provinces. And I'm talking here about Tibet, Xinjiang. Xinjiang is enormous. It's almost as big as Europe. Inner Mongolia and Qinghai. Those 4 provinces. Now, what's interesting about that is that those 4 provinces are the traditional homelands of non-Han Chinese, Tibetans, Uyghurs, Mongolians, Kazakhs. And it's very different, obviously, from the core Han Chinese territory, which is largely concentrated in China's east. So yes, I wouldn't liken it exactly to South African style or Rhodesian style apartheid, but there is no doubt some very serious cultural and ethnic differences between the Han Chinese and the peoples who have traditionally dominated those territories in China's west. And, what we're seeing in relation to the detention and intimidation of Uyghurs and Kazakhs, who happen to be of Muslim faith, in Xinjiang is just one example of the type of tactics which the Han leadership in China feel they have to impose in order to maintain control of those regions.
And how readily will they be able to maintain control in the future? Because the big jobless figures inevitably, although we can't really decipher how many people have been put out of work by the coronavirus, but there must be a level of dissent and unhappiness. There certainly was as the virus took hold inside China.
As you say, Jim, it's very, very difficult for us as outsiders to gauge that level of discontent, disgruntlement. We know it's there. Unemployment's going to be a problem. The economy was already slowing well before the coronavirus struck, and so this is going to be a very, very difficult year for China. I mean, this is easily Xi Jinping's greatest crisis that he's had to deal with under his leadership, and you could even say it's the greatest crisis that the party has had to deal with since at least 31 years ago with the Tiananmen crisis in 1989. But they have a lot of ways of not just surveilling and nipping in the bud any kind of serious dissent, but they have a pretty good formula that's worked for them rather well, and that is to keep stoking the economic engines in ways that people are more or less satisfied